please rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Ford,
Present.
Councilmember Bastian,
Here.
Councilmember Stiltner,
Here.
Vice Mayor Tremont, Mayor Burnett.
I am here. So we have a quorum. Chase is out of town. The reason why we're here to set the maximum operating and debt millage rate for the fiscal year 2020. Before we tear into the mini presentation, is there a mini presentation here?
There is.
Okay, that's what I thought. I see Alan working furiously, so I'm assuming there's a, council, I thought it'd be a good idea if we start with some comments on the things that we accomplished last week and where we want to go and what your individual thoughts are, kind of recap the events of the last budget workshops and what direction you're hoping to achieve tonight. Why don't we start with you, Scott?
I don't have any very specific comments, just I'm looking forward to being able to roll back the rate that we've got now. I think that that's a prudent thing for us to be doing. We've had several years in a row of trying to catch up. I think we've done a pretty good job with that. We've got still some ways to go with certain things for sure, and obviously growth of the city continues. Property values are going up. I do think that this is a year where we need to utilize some of our fund balance that I believe will be coming to us in the next 12 to 18 months and earmark some things that can be paid for with fund balance versus paying through those with millage. That's all I'm looking for right now.
Drew?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. For the most part, fund balance is probably going to be our friend.
Fund balance is always your friend.
Yeah, coming up this year and going
As long
into
as it's
it.
there.
And, you know, we talked about a lot of things, and there's a lot of a la carte or wish list items, if you will. And, you know, it'd be great if we could fund them all, but, you know, I don't see that being possible. So we're going to have to come up with something. And I totally get it. Everything that the city does and buys, from supplies and tools and everything else, the price of all that's going up. It's not that, you know, standing still or rolling back. Everything's going up. So, you know, we got to come up with something that, you know, has us meet all our obligations. And, you know, it'd be nice to not have to roll back any services. So that's where I'm heading.
Okay. Marilyn?
I would echo the comments before me of my fellow council members. I think our last meeting was a good start, but I do think there's some ways we can hone the budget a little bit more, because I do think the taxpayers are looking for a reduction in taxes. And I think some of our discussion about how we might use fund balance or FEMA money when it comes in, I think those are smart things to do, and I think the department heads are up to the task of managing their budgets and making do with what they've got.
For my part, I think it's important that if we haven't already, that we read the citizen survey. Because when people say that they don't have a voice, we're talking about a survey where we went and asked them what their thoughts are. Now, there are some bizarre comments in there too.
Yeah, very.
There were, you know, a couple things about, there's nothing I can do about the new Smyrna Beach Airport or some things that happen on the beach, but all aside, that's not necessarily them commenting on government Port Orange. That's people commenting on government. And there, if you go through the comments, there are a lot of wants, and there are some needs in those, and those people are echoing what their wants and needs are. Some of it is tax relief, some of it is better traffic control management, some of it has to do with public safety, and it is a long, hard, arduous read that I think that all 5 of us, if we haven't done it already, need to go through each and every one of those comments, even if it isn't your district, because those are the people that we all represent. And this budget, the final product, which we're not going to arrive at tonight, today is just a stepping stone in that direction as we set the maximum millage rate. We've still got a lot of work to do from here to get where we want to go. I think we did a lot of good things last week as far as making some decisions. We're not going to make all the remaining decisions tonight. We can't. Some things take more than a week to process, but I would like to figure out a percentage. What is our tolerance, our absolute max that we can go to, knowing that we've never been at that. That's our goal is to improve on that as we continue to work on that budget from tonight. If we had a final budget tonight, then we would have a final millage rate. That doesn't come till later, so let's keep that in mind so that we can remain flexible. Because in my mind, there are a couple of things where I want to do this or that. Which means I'm considering 2 things. I might price in what the price is of both on setting that max millage, knowing that I'm going to choose a this or a that later, so that I have the flexibility of, okay, because this or that doesn't necessarily cost the same.
Yeah.
So I need to have some flexibility there. Those are the things we need to make some decisions on. And I'm curious to see what staff is working on, and I'm sure that we're going to be hearing from that in just a second. And then we can continue with our discussion. Jay?
Sir, I was going to hit a few high points, and you've already hit them. So if we're going to get on with the show tonight, because there's been a lot of ERP testing the past 2 weeks. Alan and I worked on this presentation for you today while Scott was doing ERP testing. Alan's going to give the brief because we all talked about it pretty much the whole day. He may have to look back at Scott. Where is Scott? Oh, I know where he is. He's getting that paperwork for Councilmember Ford and Council, but he's going to start the brief, and we'll respond to your questions as a team probably.
So we're already. This is what, a 17-page slide or whatever it is, 18.
Something around there.
And we had 74 pages from Scott last week.
It's budget efficiency.
So you're giving us the shorter PowerPoint? I don't understand. You've changed. You've come around. Lay it on us.
All right, Honorable Mayor, Council, City Manager, City Attorney, Alan Rosen, Assistant City Manager. Excuse me. As indicated, the City Manager and I worked on this a little bit today, so he may chime in if I missed a point that he wants to specifically hit. But the purpose tonight is to, we've got a couple of things we're going to talk about. One is to set the max millage rate. We have to do that soon because we have to send that to the property appraiser no later than August 2nd. Actually, it's August 4th, but because that's on a weekend, it falls forward. We're also going to set the debt rate and discuss general capital, which kind of filters in, the 317 fund, which filters into the discussion as well. So, of course, as you know, once the preliminary millage rate is set, it can be lowered, but it can't be raised. So the city manager sent council some scenarios, different scenarios than some similar scenarios to what you saw last time, some a little bit different. We're going to run through a couple of those. So the first slide here shows scenarios 1, 2, and 3. Basically what these are is the base budget as it is with the current millage rate, 4.6288. The first scenario is nothing in the a la carte, so you get a 4.6288 millage rate. And just to show you also all these scenarios that the percentage change from rollback. So each one of these will show you that. So that's a 5.9% above the rollback rate. Scenario 2 is the base budget plus the a la carte, the yes only. When we were here together last week and we voted on, yeah, we definitely want to do these things at least at this point. So that adds about 0.06 to the millage rate for a total change above rollback of 7.3%. And then scenario 3 would be a base budget plus the a la carte yes and not ready. So you had that category of, yeah, we think we want to do something, we're not quite sure, but keep it on the list for now. That gives you a 4.7589 millage rate, which is 8.9% above rollback. And the base budget includes, if you remember, it includes everything in the base budget, but with the current millage rate, there's also that gap of $500,000 in operating. Actually, we found a little bit more, so $620,000 in operating that you could do something with or reduce the millage.
Okay.
So you could either buy some ongoing operating, you could buy capital, or you could reduce the millage. You could do those three things with it. So to give you an idea of what impact this would have on a typical house in Port Orange, this is a homesteaded property in Port Orange with a 2020 taxable value of $127,000. So that would probably equate to somewhere like a value of about a $200,000 house in Port Orange. So if you took scenarios 1, 2, and 3, scenario 1, the person, this homeowner would pay $9 more in city taxes, not overall, because we don't know what everybody else is going to do. So $9 more in city taxes. Scenario 2 would equate to $17 more. Scenario 3 equates to $26 more. So to go on to scenario 4, 5, and 6, these involve bringing that extra $620,000 down, just drawing it out, reducing the millage, and then going from there. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So scenario 4 would be that base budget less the 620 and no a la carte. So that gets your millage rate down to 4.4394, which is 1.6% above rollback. So nothing a la carte, no additional capital, just what's in the base budget, no additional revenue. Scenario 5 is again less that 620 with the yes only that you voted on that you really wanted last time. That gets you 2.9% above rollback. And then scenario 6, again, minus the 620 with the yes and not sure. Let's fund it, but we're not sure how we're going to do it yet. And that gets you 4.5% above rollback. And again, this kind of takes away that additional revenue, so you have less to play with if you want to say, yeah, we want to buy some capital, but you take that 620 out, there's less to use for capital or ongoing as you go through the a la carte or capital budget, if that makes sense. So what does that impact? So again, with the same type of house, scenario 4, the person would be paying $15 less in taxes this coming year. Scenario 5, they'd be paying $7 less in taxes. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify, so every time you say a la carte and how we're talking about funding it, are you, for now, for the purpose of this part of the presentation, are you referring to funding all of those items through the general fund? Or are we taking into account that a lot of these council's desire is to fund them through fund balance?
Most of the stuff I'm talking about now is ongoing funding.
Okay, thank you.
So
I'm clear.
when he says most, I'll bring it up now.
Yeah.
One of the things that you all said at the workshop last week was if you decide to do 2 new code enforcement officers, both vehicles will come out of the general fund. When in fact, there's no need for that, and it's in the best interest of the millage rate to use fund balance this time to pay for that $47,000. And that'll be a recommendation of mine later on. But all these are the general fund impact only,
Got
not the fund balance.
Okay.
Obviously, as you all know,
Okay.
won't impact the millage.
Right.
Okay.
You
So
can
fund
go.
balance items are out of the equation
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
scenarios.
And as you know, you can go one way and not the other. You don't want to pay for ongoing stuff with one-time revenue.
Correct.
But you
Right.
can always pay for, one-time thing with ongoing revenue, and then you just have that money back next year to play with, to do something else with.
Okay.
And Alan, I don't mean
Yeah,
to
sure.
jump track, I
No, no,
really
no.
don't, but, so after tonight, and as we move forward, one of the things I think might help all of us stay clear is anytime we're talking about a la carte items moving forward, if we can distinguish maybe 2 separate lists of items that say, okay, these are a la carte items that you could, if you chose to deal with on fund balance. These are ones that would be a really bad idea. These are ongoing recurring costs. So maybe just to kind of distinguish those 2
Yeah.
different lists.
I'm glad
Not
you-
to try to get an a la carte A list and a B list, but.
No, you
And a
actually.
D list.
We kind of did that to ourselves
We
last
did.
week.
Yeah.
We already did that.
Yeah, we
So,
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. we
No,
did.
that's good. You're
Yes,
you're ahead of me,
absolutely.
actually.
Continue the
Lot
metaphor.
easier to spend $47,000 of fund balance when it
Yes, sir.
doesn't affect the
Yeah,
millage.
Right.
I
yeah,
get
you're
that.
actually ahead of me because in the presentation later on, you'll see I actually broke it
I'm
up
good at that.
based on funding source.
Sorry.
You were foreshadowing. Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
that. It's great. So in these three scenarios, you see somebody would be paying $15 less, $7 less, or $2 more, depending on which scenario you choose. And again, that's the exact scenario. If you fiddle a little bit here and there, obviously that the dollars will move a little bit. So getting to your point, Councilman Stiltner, I've broken up the a la carte request by funding sources where we kind of have them right now. So this first list is the things that council said yes to last week, at least at the time, that they wanted to put in the budget, funded with general fund revenue. So it shows you each item, the department, the general fund cost, and also the associated millage rate that would need to do. You would need to make to make up that revenue. This one is the items with no decision. Weren't sure really what we're going to do, funded with general fund revenue, but that point that the city manager was making is that the code enforcement officer vehicles, if we wanted to fund those and they wanted to be in the budget, you could use one-time funding. It would just be an offset. You wouldn't have to use the 0.0144 of millage rate to do it. You could just use fund balance.
So keep in mind with all these, especially the vehicles, that's the easiest one is to give you kind of an example, is those two vehicles will not cost the general fund anything per se this year. But starting next year, we start paying into the 505 fund to replace that vehicle in 5, 7, 9 years, whatever the
Okay.
life of it is. So we will start to incur a fraction of its cost yearly from there on out. Let's say a vehicle nominally 1/5 of the cost a year. So if we buy those two vehicles at 47 grand, we're paying 1/5 of 47 grand in 21 to start
So about
buying the
8
new
grand.
ones.
Roughly 8,
Right.
80.
Just know that's
Okay.
that it's not free. We start paying.
Right. Right. That becomes in out years a general fund hole that we have to plug. So kind of those at your costs, just to keep in mind. The other part of the list is items funded with fund balance, and that's a list of about 156,000. This is a good number to keep in mind also because as we move forward with the discussion tonight, there is an additional. There was about 500,000 in fund balance that we think we're going to be able to move over to next year to fund some things. So this kind of takes away from that list, right? So you still have a little bit of money from fund balance to be able to fund some one-time
About
things as well.
340,000
Yeah.
and some change.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then a little bit less if we use the
For
money
that.
to take the 47,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then these were the items that were a no vote. Again, just to show you here, that was a list about 722,000 from the a la carte list. The other thing we wanted to talk about tonight is the debt rate. Debt rate's gone down over the last couple of years. Basically, that makes sense with values increasing. If your debt remains the same and the values increase, your debt rate just goes down because you just don't need as much effort to make the
The
same amount
next
of money
year.
to pay it off. So next year's rate would be 0.2725. Did I get that right this time? Okay, thanks. I mistyped it last time. Which would pay off a debt service rate of $902,020 for next year. Moving on to the general capital budget, which is somewhat intertwined with our discussion here. The next list you're going to see is the city manager's recommendation on the list of the 317 fund items that he feels are imperative or not so imperative or maybe can move out a year from that list moving forward. So if you see something that's green, he recommends that you fund it this year if possible. Yellow is contingent on FEMA reimbursement, so we'd keep that list
Okay.
in priority order and fund them as they came in, and then red maybe move out a year.
I want to clarify something. My priority list when we set it up was based on imperative, essential, important, and desirable. You'll notice now that you're looking at the slide that the greens are smattered in with imperatives, essentials, desirables, and imperatives. There are many factors that went into making those green, and a lot of them didn't have to do with the priority as I prioritized them, but the priority as council has indicated throughout this year, as well as the ongoing history with some of these projects. Of note, gateway signage and the Down Under revitalization. So I bring that to your attention as we go into conversation.
So this is the list, the city manager's recommended list, and things to note about the list are a lot of these things have been things that have moved from year to year to year that we've never had money to fund. We just keep moving out a year. And then the same thing is true for those things that we move out 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Those things, we already have obviously capital budget. Those things would just move out and be added to whatever we've got already in the capital budget for next year. And then of course next year we decide what we want to fund that year as well. So that's the end of the presentation, and goes into discussion about where you'd like to go from here.
Okay, I was going to ask you to put up that list. Jake, you and I had talked about a number of things on this list, and one of the questions I had is, one of the big ticket items, obviously, is we're getting an ECHO grant for the rec center.
Yes, sir.
Is there a reason why we couldn't fund our portion of that out of impact fees, rec impact fees, instead of this source?
Oh, so we did that last year, and we had a philosophical conversation about our code, chapter 21, section 6, subparagraph C. I'll read that to you. I think we're still there, and I think we can still do it. The cash is in there, but subsection C says, fees deposited shall not be expended for neighborhood or community facilities greater than 2.5 miles from the perimeter of a contributing development. Or, and this is where we got to it last year, for district facilities greater than 4 miles from the perimeter of a contribution development. And our philosophical discussion last year was the rec or the community center, the only one we have in the city at this point, should we get it, is considered a citywide or a district facility, and therefore some of the impact fees within 4 miles can be used. And that's where we went, and that's what we went by. There are some areas of Port Orange where they're outside 4 miles and it wouldn't apply. The southern portion of Woodhaven, for instance. But the money we have in impact fees right now are not those.
Right.
So
Well, it can't be. We haven't issued very many COs out there.
right. So we're good with using impact fees this year to fund phase 2 of this project.
Because it seems like that would be a big ticket item that really, things like that, impact fees are really designed for.
One of the things, yes, sir. I would say that if we were doing a community center in city center and one out at Karasi or one out at by Station 74, by our park out there, then that would probably be better suited out there. But we chose to do one community center here in city center, so I'm comfortable using that money for that.
Okay. And I still think that was a good decision because we got one set of operating costs in one building versus splitting it up over multiple portions of the city for some, in areas where it would do better in some than it would in others. Instead, I think we designed a facility that's capable of serving everybody as the city currently is configured.
Yes, sir.
Any, you guys and girls, ladies and gents, thoughts on that?
If everything in green were funded, the 579, what impact would that have on the millage rate?
Hold that question for just
Okay.
a second. I just want to make sure that we have consensus on what I was just talking about before we move on to something else.
Okay.
On the rec center using impact fees? Any issues with that? None?
No.
Okay.
All
Go
right.
ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead, Drew.
The 580, what would that have on millage?
I could calculate how much additional revenue, what the millage would be to do it, but it really depends on how you tweak it. So if you stayed at the current millage rate, you've got $620,000 you could use ongoing revenue for that, and you still got money left over. You do have, even with the items that you've already chosen from the a la carte to put towards fund balance, you still have that $350,000, gets you maybe about half that.
Okay,
a little more than half. Depends on which items you pick.
okay.
What
Very
other
good.
questions? I'm just looking at the greens, the yellows, and the reds, and the things that you've suggested to move out for a year are things that absolutely I still want to do. I think that we should be wired to be able to broadcast meetings when we have board meetings over at Parks and Rec / Public Utilities Building over at the Dorothy Hugo Annex. Does it have to happen right away? No, absolutely not. And who knows? Maybe we can stumble on some grant funding for things like that in the meantime. Who knows?
Mayor?
Yes.
Number 4, which is in green, City
Mhm.
Hall repurposing. My recollection is at a prior meeting, Councilman Stiltner had wondered if this is the year to do it, that it may be more appropriate for council to really have a discussion about what we envision the campus to be. So I guess what I'm suggesting is, in my mind, either that should move out 1 year, or in order for council to have the time to have a discussion, I don't see us spending all of that or accomplishing all of that in fiscal year 20. I see that more crossing perhaps 2 fiscal years. So I guess I'm suggesting, instead of, if we keep it there, it wouldn't be the 125, it'd be 50% of that. And the gateway signage, I know council has talked about it, desirable. I'm sorry, I just think there are more, for $115,000, you could move up number 12, the workshop, for 73, and I think there was a case to be made that we need that to protect our assets, and the floating dock design on the south side of the Causeway Park. So to me, those are much more important, quite honestly. City Hall building HVAC. I know the 125 is, only about 45% of that item, but I just think gateway signage, it's desirable, it's a great idea, but, it's like putting lipstick on the pig. We need to feed the pig.
Well, I don't think Port Orange is a pig.
Well, I'm not,
I don't think it coming off the interstate in our city, we're putting lipstick on a pig, but it is lipstick nonetheless. But, well, let's take these one at a time. Back up, City Hall repurposing. Jake, well, first of all, gentlemen, comments or questions on what Marilyn was suggesting there? And then Jake, tell us what's doable and not.
I think us spending money on figuring out what is the next 25 to 30 years for this facility and building to be and become is prudent. It needs to be done. When we're talking, if we go all the way back to where we were a couple of months ago, where we're looking at spending 7 figures on redoing HVAC in the City Hall building and things like that.
Okay.
The idea was hold back on that, see if we can keep it going and in repair. In the short term, let's move to 4. Let's take a hard look at what do we really envision for the next 30 years to get 30 more, 3 more decades or such out of this facility and this campus for staff and residents. And so I think we kind of, didn't those numbers change? I mean,
They did, and
you put in 4, right?
so that 125 is, if you walk through finance as a good example, we got like 7 people shoved into a corner answering phones and solving utility bill problems. So I have to spend a little bit of money spreading those people out and giving them some places to live. So part of that 125 is that. There's some money in there for, I'll call it City Hall hardening, for lack of a better term. Those are force protection things that I think are important for the city here that have gone unattended for about 2 years. And the good part of it is to investigate, do we do something with this building? Do we build a new building? Where do we build it? And if you recall that three-phase plan that I've been talking about a couple times this year, that comes into play. That vision in and of itself is more than $125,000 worth of visioning. But we do have somebody on staff that might be able to swing something internally, but it's going to take some time. But that money is for temporary. We're not going to get out of this building anytime soon.
Sure.
So in the meantime, we need to house our people, give them a little bit of quality of life, get them out of some of these cubby holes they're working in, and provide for them. We think until we make that decision, and we got to make that decision pretty quick, whether we're moving out of the building or refurbishing this one, what we need to do. So the HVAC, we're going to wait. Hopefully we'll have a decision in the next 12 to 18 months, and then work on that HVAC once we come up with a plan with what we're going to do with this building. And if we're not going to do anything with it, we might just suffer until we can move.
And I can appreciate all those comments and thoughts, and I would also offer council to think that realistically, this is probably something we should have done 3 to 5 years ago, at least getting the plan and the vision put together, because as these things, as we know with things like this, these are typically 3 to 5 year plans from start to finish.
No, and
Some
even
things-
if we fully funded
Right.
today, the vision still hasn't been crafted.
Exactly.
It's gonna take a while for this to execute
right,
this.
right. So
even
I
if
would
we were
just-
to fully fund it.
So
My point with that would be that I just think we need to make sure we get started on that to some degree. I think that's a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
I concur. I will say that over the holidays, when the mayor and I were walking in finance, the workspaces and conditions in there are just not good. You know, and we've
No.
seen that in other places too, and we fixed some of that, and
Right.
having the annex building and those resources have paid for sure.
So the old utilities is a blank canvas, if you will. We've put some people in the external spaces, but there's room to give people room. We just need to do something with it to make that happen. And you know, the kind of that three-phase plan for the city that I had chatted about. I'm having a meeting with some folks that own land here in Port Orange later this week, and maybe that'll unravel some certainty to that three-phase plan that'll give us something to think about next year.
Mayor,
Mm-hmm.
I stand corrected. Councilman Stiltner, you are correct. It was the HVAC. What I just heard, though, I have two comments. What I just heard, Jake, was that under the City Hall repurposing, it sounds like there's really two items. One is you need to do some minor construction to get, as space has become available, get some people there, so that's one.
Right.
But then a different item is sort of a consultant or a
That's
plan.
in. Yes, ma'am.
So I guess I'm just
Break
thinking,
it out into two different things.
if we made two items, could we fund both of those with fund balance? I mean,
Without
how
something
is
else.
a consultant to help us think where we want to be 30 or 50 years from now in terms of this building, different than a consultant that might help you with pension plans or strategic plan update? Why, maybe that belongs on the a la carte, and we know we have some funds there. The other thing is for doing some minor renovations to make workspaces. That sounds like a one-time cost of relatively minor amount that might fit under fund balance.
Also, keep in mind, the reason why we are here today is because we have been working on the thing, the DLH annex is because of the things that we've been working on for several years now.
Yeah.
And this is really the next iteration, this is not, we're not starting from scratch here.
We're continuing the.
We're continuing.
Yeah.
yes, the city is double in size than when this building opened 35 years ago, but we already have done quite a bit, freeing up to, you know, how do we infill it and make sense from a service standpoint. So this is a progression of something that we've already been working on.
And we may have even a little more than doubled. 64,000, yeah, it's probably over 50%. I mean, I'm sure we, whew, staggering. Let's see here.
Fund balance versus operating. So, the splitting is, we can split that project into two projects, and possibly, I'd have to think through. I see where you're going with the fund balance for the design, and the possible moving a city hall. So I guess my first thought is, sure, we can do that. The second thing is, you mentioned that we should put it on the à la carte. All of these items are unfunded, and I consider them on the à la carte. If you don't say yes, they're not getting funded. So these are all unfunded 317 fund requests, so they are all considered. Anything that's funded in the CIP is in that book,
Yeah.
that and funded by some other source, and we assume that you've looked at it, you're going to look at it again, you're going to vote on it on the 16th, and accept the CIP in concept or not on the 16th. And these are the only items that are really, I'll call them contentious or thought-provoking, because we either have to pay for them with fund balance, impact fees, or general fund, in this case, excess revenue to the tune of about $600,000.
Why don't we go through them one by one, starting with the greens, then the yellows, and then the reds, so that we can, do we want to do, I mean, we can do this any way you guys want to. I'm just suggesting a path forward.
Well, I'm okay with leaving the list the way it's written right now. I mean,
I don't have a problem with anything that's on that list and how it's prioritized. Of course, just like anything else, paying for it's always a challenge.
So,
Yeah.
so to Drew's point earlier, and I haven't done the math yet, but we do have that massive millage rate thing that we sent out 2 nights ago, or Monday night. But right now we have an excess of in the base budget of $620,000. This will cost you $579. So it's fairly close to the base budget, right? You could take everything out of the base budget, and you could also split it and take 350 of your, I'll call it, leftover fund balance, and 300 or 250 of your revenue excess, and pay for most of this stuff. The gateway sign is going to be a one-time use. The Down Under revitalization is going to be a one-time use. The design of our future city hall or fixing of this one, that consultant will be a one-time use. Things of that nature. So we can decide where that stuff is paid for fairly easily.
And I can only expect that if we push that gateway signage off a year or two, we may probably potentially add 10% a year to the cost, so it's going to end up just costing us more.
Sure, we've done a lot of design and a lot of work and a lot
And
of.
the question I would have is, since we're paying for some of that out of somebody else's money,
That's not true. That's all ours.
okay, it's all ours
It's
at this.
a lot of FDOT coordination
Okay.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears we'd have to walk away from, but it's
There's-
not, there's no grant, there's no money from anybody else.
Gotcha, okay.
Just to comment on that particular project, so this is my 5th year on this city council.
Mm-hmm.
Day one on this council, we started talking about revitalizing and getting the Dunlawton corridor looking back to what meets the expectations of the residents. We are still working on that. We've got a huge landscape project that is yet to get kicked off and completed. We've been working on the lighting. We hear about that corridor for a lot of different reasons from our residents. It's important to get this wrapped up. We need to get this one checked off the list. We need the landscaping done, we need the signage done, we need the lighting done. We need to get
Yes,
that
check,
all
check,
done
check.
and
Absolutely.
checked off of our list and move on to future projects. I'd hate to see us continue to kick this overall vision of the corridor any further than it's necessary. It's just taken a long time. And that's not to say that Marilyn's comments about some of the other items they're very, very valid. It's just that this one in particular, as a project, has been taking a long, long time.
So
and
what
it
you're
just-
saying is
it's
when
time to
people are
get it
sitting
done.
in traffic on Dunlawton because we can't get them moving any
They'll
faster.
have something
at
to
least
look
it's
at.
nice to
Look
look at?
I would like
Well-
I just would like,
Does the proposed budget include that other landscaping this year?
That's already.
That's all done.
That's already
Oh,
done.
it's
Hasn't
already-
happened yet.
That's
What
It's
about the
funded.
lighting that you
Done.
just
Done.
suggested?
Done.
Oh,
done.
Yeah.
Those are all
So
this
that's
year's
the look.
projects.
They're doing it
It's
right
been
now.
like a, from,
okay.
Well,
From the
when we say
bridge
done,
to-
done, it's budgeted and
Right.
and in the works.
Funded.
All, all the,
Change orders,
All that s-
re-engineer.
Oh, the-
all that
Eric.
ugliness down in District 1 and Dunlawton, that's the
Yeah, what's
Dunlawton
that?
lighting project.
Okay.
Oh, please don't get me started on that again.
It's not that bad.
Mayor, I think the policy decision we have to come to is where we want to be with millage, what we think makes sense. We've seen the numbers, and then it's up to the manager and his staff. I mean, we have some ideas how we can fund some of this, but then, you know, tweaking the numbers and making it fit, that's then in his ballpark.
What's your tolerances? If you're gonna talk about that, do we have a tolerance? Personally, I think my tolerance is 5% max, and then we work back from there, but that's me.
And Mayor, if just so everybody's clear, I heard, and I heard Councilman Stiltner say this, he wants to roll back the rate. I want to just, as far as words go, be clear. Does roll back the rate mean go to rollback? And does 5% mean what? 5%, I assume it means 5% over rollback when, in our discussions. But I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what percentage based on what baseline, so we don't get confused in conversation. Just for clarity for me. I think it's rollback. 5% over rollback.
So, Scott, I think he's asking what did,
well,
When you
in
come in-
my comments, what I was talking about initially, first of all,
Right.
let's make no doubt about it. I'd love to go all the way back to rollback.
Right.
That'd be great. What my comments were talking about initially is rolling back from the current millage.
From the current millage.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's the
So you
direction-
want something less
that's
than
the direction we wanna be going.
4.6288.
Absolutely.
Copy.
Which represents about a 5.9% over
Yeah.
the rolled back rate. And that's
So if
actually even
we-
slightly above my ceiling.
if we set the max at 5% above, that's, we're in the 4.58 range, 4.589?
5896.
Okay. I mean, that,
Trust
we
me.
can only go down from there, but that,
We will.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5.0011% above
Yeah, there you
rollback
go.
is a millage rate of 4.5896.
okay.
And what does that give you as a
4.5896.
budget?
That gives you for, I'd have to add up the whole budget, but for ad valorem revenue, it gives you $15,024,239.
Well, this year we're at $28.66 millions in a budget, I would like to know what the budget would be at 5% above rollback.
She's asking for, the budget
Because
does
I think
not,
those are relevant numbers.
so the budget doesn't change. The balance changes, right?
Yeah,
We fund less CIP and à la carte. Basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about revenue right now. We'd have to change the expenditures to match the revenues.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, you also could make some changes in your operating budget, I mean, the assumptions.
Oh, absolutely.
And the millage rate is
absolutely.
only a small, not a small portion, but 15 some odd million out of that
15 to
$40
30.
million, but it's
Right.
only like a third of
But
it.
My point is that I think it's difficult for the average taxpayer to understand mills. And when they get that the budget was 38 million last year, well, how much is it this year? What's government gonna cost me? I think those are relevant things. We wanna be transparent.
I
would
have
like
never
to
written
know
a
those
check
numbers.
to pay for my property tax dollars and millages. I've always used
Right.
a dollar
Right.
sign, absolutely.
Right. I like where the discussion is going, that we need to go lower than last year. I would note that the CPI nationally from June 2018 to June 2019 is 1.6%. And I know, that's one reason I asked the question about what assumptions were used in terms of where costs were in the operating budget. The CPI for the South is actually only 1.1%. So, I guess the average taxpayer can understand, okay, it's gonna cost me the same as last year, plus the CPI is inflation, plus it's gonna cost me whatever new development is, because the more new businesses or residences, they may demand more service. And that's about, I asked for that figure, and that's about $250,000 of new revenue. But the thing is, it's not a one-for-one. For every
Right.
dollar that a new house or a new business has, they don't expect $1 more in services. So I guess where I'm going is, for me, scenario 5, which is about a 2.9% over rollback. So we go from a budget of about 38.6 million to 39.
That'd be about 450.
0.1, something like that, is about where we should be. Because we're keeping costs where they were last year, except for inflation and the new demands or the new property construction, which creates an additional pressure for the services. So that's where I would go.
That's not totally true. There are some additional things in that budget
Yeah.
that we're obligated to somewhat.
Sure, and I've added
Um,
those into in my calculation.
Yeah.
But I'm just sort of setting a framework.
Sure.
For me, I think it's understandable, and the residents, I'd love to go to rollback, but I think the reality is we need certain things. There is inflation. We do have contracts. We need to honor those.
Right.
But a lot of those were probably negotiated at 3% CPI. If the CPI is less than that, what that says to me is you need to find some way to economize in some of the other things you're asking. Or the offset is that $250,000 that you've got in new construction for the city. So,
I would just comment that I think the CPI is relevant for part of the overall discussion. I would caution about putting too much
I
stake
think-
in CPI, because one of the things that I have seen from the different committees, like being on TPO, for example, is the cost of concrete and pavement and things like that. They've jumped up not 1.2 or 2 or 3%.
We're
They're
not
jumping up in
buying-
increments of
We're not buying
15
groceries, is what
Yeah,
you're
they're
saying.
jumping up in increments of 15 to 30%.
Yep.
So we got to be very cautious about the CPI, which is largely based on consumables and groceries and a lot of different things like that, and also cautious about a national CPI versus even in our state versus what's going on right here in Volusia County. You look at property rates for home values and cost, that's a huge factor to show you that just the cost of homes are jumping up now in increments of 6, 8,
I-
10, 12% in some
I'm gonna
places.
tell you,
in
I have a
our
large
county.
concern about that. Home affordability index is going off the scale again. And just the costs of construction, of the same home last year to this year is up almost 30% year over year, just construction costs. I can't, sorry about that. The problem I have with 1.6, I think it's a great guideline. Because what we're asking for is our residents to pay, but you know what? We didn't use that CPI because when we figured out what our employees' raises are. And they certainly didn't come running to us and say, hey, it's only 1.6%, so I'm gonna be happy with 1.6% this year. And to a person, if you'd done that, I'd have told you you're crazy.
It would've been a slap
And
in the face.
as a council, we committed to better than that.
Absolutely.
Well, and if I can just for a minute, and I'll
And-
wrap up my
and-
comments.
Well, let me finish it. And figuring that in, knowing that we've committed to our employees, and I don't think we've gone off the rails in responsibility. I don't think we promised them the world. I think we've kept that in check. Keep in mind, labor is about 3/4 of our cost.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Is the other thing that the CPI doesn't relate to is the labor issues that you have geographically right here. You know, it's wonderful to see the joblessness rate basically vanish. You know, and unemployment. You know, those issues get taken care of. What that has created, though, is a very competitive market in the labor force, and you've still got to be able to go find folks and bring them to municipal, county, and state governments to take care of the tasks that need to be handled, and you got to go find those folks at a competitive rate. So there's a balance there, and you know it's interesting to watch as unemployment issues get taken care of. Now you've got cost issues, right? So you get a lot of people
You're looking
in different
forward.
services.
And that's okay, but right now, we're talking about just a budget for the things we've already committed to, or is.
Well, I get that. I'm talking
Yeah.
about an overall relation to using one particular thing like a CPI to justify where we want to go on a millage.
And as far as affordable housing, these new apartment complexes coming in, I mean, is there any affordable housing left in Port Orange, as to say? Don't even go countywide. 2-bedroom apartments are going for $1,400+. 3 bedrooms are closer to $1,700. A 1-bedroom is $1,200 a month for an apartment. You got no garage, you got no yard, so there's not a lot of affordable housing
Well,
in
I
this
would-
area.
I would say in District 1 there was, and I think the July 14th slideshow showed the average cost of a house in Port Orange. It really was, well,
The
in
median is
District
not
1 it
average,
was
though.
about 83,000, much
Mhm.
lower
Wait.
than some of the other places.
Where?
I mean, your
Yeah.
point is CPI can't do everything, and
It's a
we
good
have to
guideline.
honor our contracts.
Absolutely.
But I think it's a framework instead of just saying
guideline.
cost is going up. And I fully understand about concrete and those type of things, which is why the discussion of fund balance,
Yeah.
and some other reimbursements, we wanna go up. You know, we wanna use those
Right.
dollars, but there are some things in the operating budget that I think the manager and his department heads could take a look at.
I don't think that, I mean, if, right now, let me just frame the conversation. Right now, we're between 4.50 and 4.5896. And setting that 4.5896, if we were to do that as our ceiling, with the objective of trying to get to 4.5, I don't necessarily, knowing, you know, we're not done tonight. I don't think that is, we've got cities that have set their max millage rates in the double digits, neighbors, and I think if they ended up in those double digits at the end of the day, yeah, there'd be a lot of people choking, and we're
Well,
not talking about that.
They can
here.
do that, and then people can move here, you know.
I wouldn't mind
No.
that.
Not on Dunlop, they can't.
Down the whole Dunlop.
Mayor, maybe I'm missing the numbers. I know you were saying this kind of quick. So are you suggesting a starting point of 4.5695?
4.5896 is 5%.
That was that number that I called out earlier. It's not on this presentation.
Oh,
It's on
That's the number I
tab
called
4
out
of
that Alan
yesterday's,
copied.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
an email.
tab 4 of yesterday's email. And just to put things in a perspective, hold on. That would bring in revenue. I lost it.
It's
That would-
about 308,000.
900,000.
There's
That's
about
what
a
you-
$308,000 difference between the two numbers.
Yeah, there you go.
15.5
Table
versus
From
15.8.
a couple days ago.
Yep.
15.506 versus 15.814.
15,814 is the total. We collect at 95%, so we would log 15,024,239 at 4.5896. If you look at scenario, trying to find it, scenario 2. You got scenario 2 up? Scenario 2 is based current millage, at
Plus the
current
other
millage
part.
at 4.6288, that revenue is 15,152,000. So if you're with me, we lower it to 4.5896, that revenue goes to 15,024, a difference of $125,000.
The city hall repurposing.
So
Which isn't funded yet anyway.
so that would give you some slop to play with for the next month and a half to discuss what we may want to do, what we might not want to do, and if council doesn't wish to do anything more and is happy with what they have already said yes to, and possibly say yes to everything that they're not ready to, that's still fundable, and the millage can still be dropped somewhat in September. And obviously, it can be dropped to anything in September. So it doesn't.
We've done it before.
Well, and so that's the conversation, and Mayor, you and I have philosophically talked about this as well as most other council members. I understand the prudence of setting the max millage at a good level now, but you don't want to tie your hands now and not regret it later, but be forced to not do something because you cut it too quickly. So whatever you wish to do, we will execute. But those are my thoughts.
Comments?
I'd like to see us start a little lower than that,
A little lower than,
5%. I'm okay with us starting at 4.5 and working down from there. I think that's a reasonable amount. I think we can work within that framework. I think a 4.5695 is a good place to set our cap for tonight and work from there.
what did you say that millage rate would be?
4.5695.
Well, you're a little off, but you're real close.
That's
with-
where he's
I'm
reading
going
off
with
of
the
scenario 6.
Number in the slide.
Mayor.
Okay. 4.5695, which is about 4.5%.
The table that was previously distributed had 4.5677 as 4.5%.
I'll leave it to the math folks in the audience to help out. What gets us at 4.5%?
Yeah, because 4.5677 is what I just calculated, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me.
I mean, I'm okay at setting the max at 4.5896 at 5% and working down from there. Because, I mean, we know we're not going any higher, it's only gonna go lower, so.
I'll entertain a motion to whatever it is you guys want to do.
I'm gonna wait till I get the right calculation.
It's 4.5677.
4.5677 is 4.5%.
Trust me, yes. Okay, don't trust me. That's what I came
I'll
up
write
with.
you.
And that gets you 14,952,549 in
I'll
revenue.
move 4.5677 as the mill rate. Or
Second.
term, yeah, max mill.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any other comments from council?
Yes, Mayor. Well, I would like a lower rate. I am willing to endorse this because I think to emphasize too much, well, we need to make it higher because it gives us flexibility. That's a siren song, and we know what happens to the sailors that listen to that. The reality is a 4.5% rate above rollback gives us $830,000
You bet.
more to use. And when you're looking at the CIP and the things that we've talked about, we're not even talking about the strategy we've discussed of returning FEMA dollars. So that's why, if we say, well, we gotta think of those things too. Those dollars aren't before us yet. So for us to build those in to whatever the maximum rate is, it's a siren song. The reality is a 5% is $900,000 above what a rollback rate is. And staying at level with last year, 4.6288, is $1 million more. Quite honestly, we are better decision makers than that. I think our department heads are better at managing their money. And I think that we should be at the 4.5% of 4.5677 as a maximum.
I don't have a problem with that myself, mainly because that's about where I had my high-end tolerance when I came in myself, but that's just me. But when I'm setting my high-end tolerance, what I'm saying is that this is the maximum I'll accept. Let's go back, sharpen our pencils, because we're not done. We're just setting a max millage rate. We're not establishing a full-fledged budget tonight. We can give direction on those things, but this is our max. Anyone from the public like to speak to this? No one? Back to us. Gentlemen, ladies, any other comments? There being none, call the roll.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Councilmember Bastian.
Yes.
Councilmember Stiltner.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, let it be said that we have set the maximum millage rate for the 2020 property tax season at 4.5677, which is approximately 4.5% above the rollback rate, but still below the current millage rate. I didn't figure that out yet, but that's what we've just done. However, let's also keep in mind, we are not done. And we're gonna have a lot of decisions to make, moving forward. But this is where we are. I think we've established a roadmap for staff. Jay?
No, I concur. Mayor, can we also get a motion and a second for the debt?
That's what I was just asking, do we have to set the debt
I-
rate, or
I
does
would-
it set
I would-
itself?
I would like to just get that taken care of.
Okay, let's
even
do
if
it.
we don't.
Set and forget.
So we wanna do.
What's that number you presented?
0.2725.
Move to set the debt service rate at that number right there.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to set the Port Orange debt millage rate at 0.2725 for fiscal year 20. We have a motion, and a second. Anyone here care to speak to this item? There being none, back to us. Council, other comments?
No, not on this
Mayor?
one.
If I may, there's one more motion tonight, and that is to set the hearing dates of September 11th, 2019, and
Can we
September
finish this
24th.
first?
Of course.
Okay.
Excuse my
Yeah,
interruption.
we're not done.
Okay. Any other comments on this? There being none, call the roll.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Councilmember Bastian.
Yes.
Councilmember Stiltner.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 4-0.
I'd already done that.
Now, we need to set the dates for the hearing.
Yep.
Margaret, you want to announce what those are tentatively planned to be?
Budget hearings will be held Wednesday, September 11 at what time?
6:30?
5:30.
Oh,
5:30.
5:30. And Tuesday, September 24th at 5:30.
Can we do 5:30? I thought we were statutorily bound that I'm sorry, not statutory, our ordinance, either an ordinance or charter, that one of these meetings had to start at a certain time, and I think that was 7 PM.
Last year, at this meeting, we stated the time and we couldn't deviate from that
Right.
time.
So the time
It's
you
your
So the
stay-
time you state, and this is not tentative dates, these are
Right.
not tentative dates, these
Well,
are
they're
dates.
tentative until we pass it.
Right.
Yes,
I
got it.
think you might be talking about the swearing in.
Okay.
The meeting for swearing in in
Right.
December is a set time that's in
Yep.
the
Okay.
charter.
Yep.
Because whatever, I guess they had 7 PM meetings.
Right.
And they set the charter accordingly back then. We
Mhm.
started at 6:30, okay. I just want to make sure that we're good and that we
We're
don't
good.
advertise something.
Nope, we're good.
All right, so I need a motion to set the hearing dates for September 11th on Wednesday at 5:30 PM.
So we have to vote on that.
And the second hearing date on September 24th, Tuesday at 5:30 PM. Can I have a mo-
So moved.
we have a motion?
Second.
And we have a second. Comments on that? Anyone here speak to this? Being none, final comments? Call the roll.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Councilmember Bastian.
Yes.
Councilmember Stiltner.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 4-0. Other comments? We'll start with Scott.
None this evening.
Drew?
No, nothing further tonight. I mean, there's still obviously work to do and we'll get there.
Marilyn?
Nothing?
It is July 30th. We will be setting the first of our final, and I want the work done before that meeting. I don't want us to be in flux between meeting 1 and meeting 2. So between July 30th and September 11th, we've got to do the heavy lifting, we've got to do the work, all of us, so that we come up with a budget that serves the people's needs, that everybody can live with. What I don't want is us to have problems on the first night and then have problems on the second night. The public needs to know clearly what our objective is by night 1, by September 11th.
Mayor, a quick request. We'll always keep a backup slide, but for future discussions, I am not going to show the no items anymore. If you all ever want to bring those back, you're welcome to do so. Your no wasn't binding. But we're going to proceed that stuff fell off the face of the earth and we'll have to retrieve it if you want it for something.
That simplifies things for
Okay.
understanding. I like that.
Okay,
We
and
we
then
have a
we'll-
problem with that?
We'll provide
Okay.
you the not ready list and how those things can be funded. Just as another tool. And Councilmember Ford asked for the budget. I had it, I didn't have enough time to look at it to make sure it was valid. We got rid of a lot of scenarios tonight, so I will provide that budget at the current max millage rate, just to give you something to look at.
Okay.
You only
Okay?
have 9 you need to do, if you go in increments of 5.
Well, we'll, whatever increment you want to go in, it ends up being different.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just really curious as to why my calculations were different on those two spreadsheets, and I was really concerned.
Me too.
Yeah.
But I found out that the number that you have for the scenarios, it's rounded, so it's easier to see. The one in that long spreadsheet is drawn out to the nth degree, so it's much more accurate. So the one you adopted is much more accurate.
Which is why I didn't rely on either one of those numbers.
No, you used the right one.
I know I did.
Yeah.
I computed it. Don't mess with me. Anything else come before us this evening?
Sir, pleasant reminder, once again, next meeting, we will be approving the CIP in concept, which basically some of the items tonight we kind of talked through, so, just to let you know, we gave you your new CIP books tonight. They haven't changed much, but some slightly. Nothing that needs to be brought to your attention, that hasn't been brought to your attention on the CIP list that you saw tonight.
I look forward to a vibrant discussion.
Got it.
I'm going to ask one more time. Anything else come before us this evening? As I drop the gavel and say the answer is no, have a good night.